Welcome. Thank you so much for coming to the last, not the least, the one of the day. I know you're probably all tired and bought out and sold out and everything, but this is going to be a super exciting chat. We've got some amazing panelists. I'm Louise Healy-Adonis. I'm the founder of the Better Trends company. It's a newly founded company. My business partner Natalie is here, who is also an indie business owner. So we love Top Drawer. We come here all the time. We're really about indie and SMEs and helping people do what they can in the best, most responsible, sustainable way. So today we're going to talk about storytelling and what that means for your brand, how you can storytell with intent, conviction, meaning and purpose. And we have two amazing ladies here. Sonya, would you like to introduce yourself?
Thank you. Oh. Hi, I think that's better. My name is Sonya Barlow. I am the founder of Like-Minded Females. We're a social enterprise to empower, educate and enable women and marginalised communities into tech, entrepreneurship and digital. 100% voluntary led. We've upskilled over 10,000 people in 3 years and organically grown to over 35,000 in social following. Outside of that, I'm an author. I have my book Unprepared to Entrepreneur coming out on the 3rd of October, so I'm very scared. I'm a BBC radio presenter. I host the Everyday Hustle, which by its name is a radio show about the everyday hustle and how normal people make it as business owners. And I run my own diversity consultancy, which is all about supporting businesses, especially small, medium-sized enterprises, and how to be more inclusive, and most importantly, how to attract great talent that wants to stay with them long term.
Great, and I'm Amira Hashish. I'm the founder of a content and creative and events consultancy called Rapport, which really revolves around storytelling in every sense. So I work very closely with lots of lifestyle and hospitality brands, and we get to grips with what their story is, whether it's a product or a place or a person, and we figure out how to make that enticing and compelling for a global audience through all kinds of strategies. So, and my background is actually in journalism, so I'm very familiar with storytelling in that sense, and I still write for lots of publications, including the Evening Standard, The Independent, and Suitcase magazine.
Thank you. And I've worked in trends and forecasting for many, many years with big brands, small brands, high street retailers. And again, that storytelling is so important. I founded the Better Trends company to really bring together all those ideas of how we use narratives and trends with product. It can be confusing, and we're really about looking at those big stories. What do they mean? What do they mean in social and cultural contexts? And then how do they filter down to product, colour, and so on, rather than just looking at something because it's quite nice. So we're really talking about stories with meaning and purpose today. So let's get back into the detail of that. And I think let's kick it off first of all, Amira, with what do we actually mean? It's very good sort of saying storytelling, but what do we mean by that?
Well, I think these days consumers across the board are just, really much more informed than they ever were. So when someone invests in a product, a brand, or an experience, they really want to know what the meaning of it is. So it's not enough anymore, like you said, just to have something beautiful or, an amazing place that someone can go and visit without actually explaining why it has substance. So storytelling for me is about getting to know the individual, the people behind a brand, and really getting to grips with the little nuggets of information that people are going to want to get a feel for, whether that's the sort of the heritage, the legacy of a brand, or if it's a new brand, what makes it sustainable, what it's doing for the planet to make it sort of more worthwhile. Or if it's just something fun, it still needs to have that kind of path that people can follow, so that there's a real journey, there's a real narrative behind the product. So I really think it's the kind of the route that everyone is going to take, whether you're big brand that's been going for many years, or whether you're a startup. And I noticed it during my time as a journalist and editor. We would get approached by people regularly, very established brands, to figure out how they could engage with their audience again. People were, it wasn't enough anymore just to put a display ad in a newspaper and hope for the best. People wanted to track the full story, and that's kind of how I got involved in that side of things and realized that actually it was very exciting.
Yeah, I like that you brought in the idea of legacy and history as well. And I think we've all probably seen that in the news recently with Tiffany's trying to, rebrand, relaunch, make themselves a very modern company with new figureheads like Beyonce and Jay-Z referencing, Basquiat artwork. And there was a lot of chatter around that. So it's interesting that people connecting, people weren't connecting. So I'd love your opinion on what makes people connect, Sonya.
Yeah, it's such a great question. And even to kind of what you've mentioned on Tiffany's, I mean, saying that Swarovski have also come out and done a whole different rebrand with really young, diverse talent, because they want to be seen as not just something that was 50 years ago, but something that is in the present. And I think to answer your question, that's what it is. What makes a great, what makes great content, what makes a great story, what makes a customer come back is, how do you understand the customer's problem? How are you solving their problem? Even a problem that they didn't think they had. I don't need to buy more jewelry, but when I go into a store, I'm like, oh, maybe I'm missing a bangle and I'd love to buy that, right? You create problems, you help customers, but also the additional element is, how are you helping them to get better? I think, if anything, the pandemic, and especially in the last 18 months, we're looking for retailers, we're looking for businesses, we're looking for companies, or people even, who are leveling us up, who are making us feel better, do better, think better. And so that really is right now what I think customers are capturing when it comes to what makes a great story, what makes a great brand. It's, one, do you actually know what I want? Two, are you solving that problem? And three, how are you making sure that if I come into your business, you're going to help me get better and better and better and evolve?
I think also an interesting way to look at that is, especially with the Tiffany example, is who you're collaborating with and what brand values they stand for. So Beyonce and Jay-Z are a brand in themselves, right? And so they've aligned themselves very neatly with a brand that already is kind of paving the way for a lot of change. And I think, it's, why not team up a legacy brand with another brand that kind of chimes to that new generation?
That's really great advice to many indie businesses and small businesses here might have some heritage that they might struggle with. How do I bring myself into the 21st century, without losing my heritage, my provenance, my values? And sometimes collaborations can really help that. So I think that's a really, really key point.
Yeah, and it's understanding the values, I think. I mean, the chances are not all of us have the budgets of Tiffany's who can afford Beyonce and Jay-Z, right? But there are other versions of that. There are people who do have those values that, might have a following that doesn't have to even be massive, but is really relevant to your audience.
Yeah, I think if I was just to add, one thing that I've seen, especially a lot of businesses get wrong, including my own business, is feeling like we have to be everything or we have to cater to everyone. Last year in the pandemic, my business went wild, it grew, it was beautiful. But then I started offering all these different products, all these different services that didn't fit within my values or wasn't authentic. It didn't really speak to my core customer, but it was, hey, we have to jump on that trend because that trend looks fancy and I need to be a part of that. So equally, take a step back and what is it you do? Why do you do it? Always go back to your purpose. And maybe, the Beyoncés of the world aren't for your brand, and that's okay. Maybe your collaborators or your partners are different. Think about what that difference is and really own into that difference. Whereas, a few years ago, it was everybody wants to be the same. No, if you're different, that's why customers are going to come to you, because you've got something special.
Yeah, that unique value, absolutely. And I think to your point, Sonya, the idea that we have to do everything and get everything and, be super inclusive and super sustainable and do everything all the time. We can't do that, especially as small and indie businesses. And I mean, that's actually part of our brand story. We're the better trends company. We're not the best. We're not the perfect. And that's really important, that we just want to do better, be better, exactly as you said, Sonya. So those are really key things to keep in mind, to be authentic to your own brand, your own values. Don't try and, try and jump on that train just because. If there's a meaning to it, if there's purpose, then that's great. And I've actually got some data here, fancy stats, that I thought was just really interesting, because we see stats the whole time, but this is from a recent 2020 consumer culture report by the 5Ws agency, and they say that 83% of millennials feel that it's important for the brands that they buy from to have the same values and belief systems that they do. So you can see that, I mean, 83% is huge. And millennials aren't that young cohort anymore. You know, millennials are reaching 40. So we're seeing this like swathe of a huge cohort of generation really demanding that from brands.
And Kantar and Unilever, I believe it was, did a recent report around the beauty industry and advertising. They said 4 out of 5 consumers know when a business in the advertising and in the beauty market are not being authentic, and they're less likely to buy. And equally, you know, that plays on diversity, plays on representation, but it plays on the world is your oyster. Why does everyone look and feel the same and not represent me and my uniqueness? I'm not going to go there. I know when it's a facade. You know, 81% of customers, or 81% of your purchasing decisions are based on someone's recommendations, but as consumers we're recommending less because we don't have an affiliation. So when you look at the data, when you look at the research, when you look at the stats, the diversity of product and teams can grow your businesses by minimum 17%. Why would you not diversify the work you're doing, but also use that same angle to tone in and say, here is my value, here's what makes me different, here's why you should come to me over a competitor. And there are so many competitors in the world right now, right? There are 4 million SMEs just in the UK alone. Everyone is doing something same or similar, but it's what makes you different.
Yeah, I think there's 2 interesting takeaways for me from that discussion, actually. You know, the authentic side of things, super important to be transparent, even if you're not doing everything 100% right. I think a lot of people are jumping on the bandwagon of buzzwords, you know. Everyone should be and wants to be sustainable, but the truth is your business right now might not be that sustainable. So it's about being open with people about what steps you're taking to make change, even if you're not fully there yet. But I think it's really dangerous to go, you know, jump on that bandwagon without having anything to back it up, because people will very, very quickly find that out, right? Like I said, people can do their homework these days. And the other interesting thing, you know, with your stat and millennials, I've done a lot of research into the new luxury and what it means, what luxury means to a consumer these days. And it's so different if we sort of rewind even, you know, in the not too distant past. It's no longer, I don't think, perceived as luxury if you buy a really fancy flash product and kind of show that off to your friends. In fact, that's not even very cool anymore. But what is luxury is time and how you invest it and the experiences that come with that. Or even the kind of products that you're investing in to better your life, to increase your wellness, to sort of enhance your mood. These brands, or brands that kind of align with those values, I think are seen as much more relevant now. And it's interesting that that's the sort of new path that a lot of luxury brands are taking as well. They're recognizing that this millennial consumer who now has the spending power is shopping and spending their money in a different way.
Yeah, absolutely. It's interesting that you're talking about, you know, the storytelling, you know, it has to have something behind it. And we've definitely noticed in doing our trend research at the Better Trends company that it is echoed, that people really want that contextualization, the culture. It's something, we talk about macro trends quite a lot, but essentially, how do you connect with people? What's going on in their lives? What are they doing? How are they living? How are they working? You know, we were all saying how nice it is to actually be face-to-face and not on Zoom for once. So how are we feeling about this new physical connection? If you're digital, e-com, how do you then recreate that online still without having that Zoom fatigue? How are you really thinking about that connection? I've got a great quote here from Sprout Social that connection is the new currency. And I think it's absolutely key that we really take this on board with our businesses and think about the idea of where we use the 4 Ps quite a lot in our business, which is not the marketing 4 Ps, but it's profit, purpose, planet, and people. So which order do you put them in? We say at the Better Trends company that we always put people and planet first.
Yeah.
And then you have your purpose, and then your profit will come organically because you have that messaging. So when you put all those things together, you're telling that story.
Absolutely. I mean, that's really why I called Rapport, is because for me, it's all about that connection to another person, to a product and the story behind that product, or to an experience. So for me, the connection is the new currency, just completely chimes with everything that I do. And what's been interesting is actually seeing a lot of brands, change their approach. So I get asked a lot to create storytelling platforms within the digital platforms of different brands. So I will create a hub that is not one big push for the specific product that the brand is putting out, but actually is more aligned with the values that the brand cares about and what it represents. So, we will write stories just as I would for, a magazine or a newspaper or a publication online for the digital content arm of that brand. So that's one way of connecting with people. And then physically, I think with events being back, thank goodness, we're all here today. You don't have to structure an event that just looks like one big ad again. Do it in an interesting way. Get people together over supper. Open up those conversations. Teach them what you're all about, and naturally they will then become interested in your product, and the profit, the other P flows hopefully. But completely agree. Start with the people.
Yeah, and I think we have to also acknowledge that we as retailers, as businesses, are acknowledging the change, but so are social platforms themselves are using it for connections. So this year I was named as one of LinkedIn's change makers, so one of 8 across UK and Europe, right? Statistically, that's like this small. But that's because LinkedIn as a platform, alongside the other platforms that exist, want to be seen as one where you can create connections, where you are learning, where you're sharing, where you can build content that's really supporting other people and you can have conversations. Same with Instagram. Instagram has adapted Reels and, conference style kind of IG lives, groups. Same with WhatsApp, Snapchat, TikTok, even its evolution. The point is that even social platforms that we're using acknowledge that they have to put people first, that they have to focus on connectivity, they have to focus on communication, because if you even just go back to Maslow's hierarchy of needs, one of the first things we need is to feel like we belong, and we need community, we need people, we need belonging, and that's why even community absolutely is a buzzword, but it's an attribute, it's a necessity, it's not a nice to have anymore. You have to have a sense of community if you are to hit those 4 Ps, or if you are to be a sustainable business which is financially viable for the future.
Yeah, absolutely. Funny enough, I'm working at the moment with a property group who have identified that the biggest thing people are looking for, people who do have decent amounts of spending power, is not the fancy apartment necessarily, or even the location. It's what that gives them in terms of community. So we're really thinking about their messaging and how we can enhance that for people who do become residents, who do want to go and pay a visit. That has come out on top. Even when it comes to spending big and investing in a home, people want to feel like they're part of something and they belong.
I like that. Both of you just said some really key points that I was thinking about, and the idea of experience as storytelling, but also sharing knowledge as storytelling. I mean, they're both key, especially for indie businesses, especially for our community, and that idea of creating community that is meaningful through both experiences and sharing your knowledge exchange, pairing up, collaboration, all of those things. We shouldn't really be looking at others in the community as competition. And one of our mantras, actually, Better Trends Company, is community, not competition. And it is something that seems to resonate with people.
For sure.
Which is great. I mean,
and you also don't want to sit with people who are exactly like you. If we're talking about those conversations, it's so important to diversify. I don't want to go to dinner or to an event with a bunch of me's. I want to talk to my people who are maybe doing similarly aligned things, but that are also part of different communities and different cultures with different brands. Yeah. I think it's important to that's how you learn, that's how you're going to grow and amplify your business as well.
The only one thing I would say is that community is not the same as social following, right? I think this is really important as a point to make. You might have 100K in terms of your social following. That is not your community. Community is building relationships, understanding them, listening to them, be that through a focus group, be that through a WhatsApp group, be that through some kind of group where you're having a one-to-one relationship. There's been an influx, I would say, of businesses, of entrepreneurs, of brands who are making statements like, we have a community of X number, but actually your community aren't converting. They're not engaged. They're following you. They want to be a part of that community. So what are you doing to take your customers from being a customer to a follower, to a community member, to someone who is extremely loyal? And it's really important to raise that. Just because of the work that I do, I run a community, but our social following across platforms is around 35,000. That does not mean we have a social community of 35,000, right? And I'm very honest and transparent about that. That means we have a community on our platforms across channels of, I would say, about 3/4 of that number. But just because they're following us doesn't mean they're a part of our community. Because they're following us, it means that they're automatically engaged, they're interested, and they're ready to convert. They're ready to switch. They're ready to make that leap. What are you doing? Being mindful of your own time as well to really support them in that connectivity, in that community, in establishing those same or similar values so they feel like they aren't alone. And that is really important for us to acknowledge as business owners, as retailers, and as brands.
That's such a good point. And so many brands, especially big brands, have fallen foul of that so much. I mean, the Pepsi gate a long time ago now, it seems, but also the ideas that they reach so many people and are so meaningful to many people, but not giving anything back, just, luxuriating in the millions of followers is not really community, exactly as Sonya said. So how do we arrange our time, not burn out, set boundaries? Obviously, we're all small businesses, but also give back. And I've actually really enjoyed some little coffee meetings. Lots of people are doing the 15 minutes. Do you want to have a meet? Here's my calendar. Let's just chat. And those kind of reach outs I've started doing. I recently came back from maternity leave and felt really out of it. And having those little touch points and feeling that you're part of community again is so important. So if you can put a little bit of your time aside and just connect with people. Coffee dates might not be right for you, but maybe there's another mechanism or device that you have within your social media arsenal, or something else that you can do. Maybe it's about creating a group, but there is that real feeling of belonging. I think that's such a great word, Sonya, as well. That big brands really can't do, and we can, and we should capitalize on that.
Yeah, and also it's being accessible, and the other thing that a lot of big brands struggle with is having that kind of direct access to the consumer, which is why they're trying to kind of diversify and create smaller portfolios within their brand. But absolutely, it's a really big plus side of being a small business is being able to directly engage with people who become interested in your product. And I think that's something to really take advantage of. And also I often get approached by people who say, should I collaborate with so-and-so because they've got, 1 million plus followers, but, they're going to charge me X amount. And just like you were saying, it's not just about the quantity. It's really figuring out who your audience is, who you're trying to reach. And you might have several different pots of audiences, but establish that first and then figure out what conversation is going to be enticing for them and how you can connect in that way. But yeah, definitely don't go down the route of this person has millions of followers, so I'll splash out on them. It might be right for you, but sometimes it's better to go with a targeted approach.
Absolutely. And I think for one of my last questions or points of discussion, it's really interesting that we were talking about being in physical space, whereas gaming and online kind of interaction is so big right now. So the gaming community and lots of people who work in VR, there's an amazing woman called Kathy Hackle who works with the metaverse, if any of you are interested in that. She's a Forbes writer, and she uses the word story living quite a lot instead of storytelling. And I think that's such a nice thing to think about, like living your stories through either the experiences that Amira was talking about or, different ways of getting to the consumer. So I think as a last point, what are your recommendations, let's start with Sonya, for really getting to that point where maybe as small businesses we can start to get to the story living point rather than storytelling?
Yeah, I mean, we could all try and invest into VR, though it's very expensive. But I completely agree with you. I have a really good friend whose name is Olga, and she runs Museumio, which is a VR kind of kids. It's bringing museums into the households of kids, especially those who don't have access to it. It's amazing. But the point I'm trying to make is, it goes back to it goes back to the topic before. It was about accessibility. If you want to have story living, it's how are you making sure that your brand, your products, your customers, your consumers, your failures are accessible. Customers don't just want a pretty aesthetic. They don't want to know how much you've succeeded. They want to know, what have you done in the background? Have you failed? Where did you mess up? Why did you learn? And why are we going back to you? It's about being vulnerable, being about authentic. So if we can't go and invest in VR platforms or pay someone with 1 million followings for engagement, what we can do is we can be really authentic online. That doesn't mean having to put your personal life on display, by no means, but that means, what's your story? Why did you build what you're building? What did you learn from? How long have you been around? What went wrong? What are you doing right? What can someone learn from you? So I think it's about accessibility. It's about being inclusive, diversifying your story, diversifying your community, diversifying your people so that you're learning, but then taking those learnings and educating people back. The reason why maybe we're sitting on this panel, or in the last 18 months, I personally have really established myself as a brand and as a business, is because every time I learn something, I'm like, oh, if I can do it, you can do it. Here's the rule book. Here's the guide. That's literally, I've written a book on it to be like, why should I reap the benefits alone? So when you're story living, if you're thinking about the two, story is, the kind of the process, and the living is what are you doing day to day. Bring it together, make it unique, and tell the world, because those are the same people that are going to come back, because they're going to quote you, like we're quoting the quotes now, to be like, actually, Sonya said that really interesting thing that one time, that's who you should go follow. That's who you should engage with. And as a business, their businesses aren't just there to make money. They're there to give back. And that, I think, is not only the future of business, the future of trends, but I think consumers are really, and we've spoken about this, they're woke, they're awake. They're realizing, you're just doing the work, you're ticking the boxes, but you're not actually making a difference.
Yeah, and I completely agree. And also I think with the story living side of things, you just have to figure out, again, if it's true to your brand, right? So it might work for you to go down the VR route, but actually, if you're someone who would, is all about the craftsmanship side of things, then I think it's probably really important to be in a room with people showing how you workshop your product, just getting the essence of it out there. So it's just going back to the audience side of things, figuring out what living means for them. And the other thing I would say is that if you are a small business or brand, you probably are the story, right? It's, people want that authentic takeaway of a person that is behind a product that they're buying into. So you are living and breathing that brand. You are the kind of embodiment of it. So that should be part of your process too, is getting in front of people and, just introducing them to you. And you are that sort of living experience that they could then invest in. And so many times I think people kind of get caught up in creating an amazing product without realizing that as part of this storytelling, story living process, you're actually the very interesting thing about it. So don't feel, I think as Brits as well, sometimes we're kind of slightly shy when it comes to being able to kind of talk about yourself and big yourself up in that way, which in other parts of the world, not to name names, maybe people are less so, but it's fascinating to see that when you become that living being of your product, people will really get invested. And one more point, because I'm conscious that we do have to wrap, but there's a street in Los Angeles which I am fascinated by, because I think it is a great showcase of story living and how it's taking over the world. And it comprises loads of different fashion and interior design brands, and there's the kind of rodeo drives of Los Angeles, which are big and flash and have the very established brands, and then there's this street. And this is the street, it's just off Melrose Avenue, if anyone knows LA, where people are now flocking to. Those millennial spenders are going and they're meeting the artisans who make the dresses and the candle makers and the note card makers. And they love the fact that they can step into their store, have an interaction with that person and then take something away. And, in a city like LA, that's hard to do, but it's completely taking over. And I think that's going to be the same globally.
Absolutely. Yeah, before we finish, I just want to mention what we were talking about before, which was this. If anyone lives near Walthamstow, you probably know the Black Horse Lane Atelier, who make jeans, denim, but when you go, it's all personalized. It's something that you have as an experience. You live that story, and it's just so wonderful. You're in the factory. Everyone is making the jeans around you. They're measuring you. You meet the owner. They have a supper club. There's different things that you can do with your business. Might not align exactly with that, but as long as you're authentic and you show people how your craft is evolving and what you're doing, again, the story doesn't end. Once you tell the story carries on. It evolves. Once you have your story, then that's great. You build on it. It's not something that you just put on a shelf and yep, that's my story over there. So storytelling is story living. It's evolving. It's being you and showing you and your work in a really authentic, purposeful, meaningful way. And I think that's basically what we are all really excited about the future of that. So to end, we've just got some key takeaways to summarize what I think we've been trying to talk about. We could talk forever about this. It's so exciting, but definitely the social impact and telling stories that matter. I think we've been super clear on that. Brands need to reflect what the customers want, but also their own values too. It's a real give and take kind of scenario. So artistic storytelling, really the experience. As Amira was talking about, it can be any type of experience. It can be a visit to your factory, your home. It can be a supper club. It can be a visit to a different space. It can be anything, but an experience that is engaging and educating is really invaluable. Third, obviously, we're talking about diversity, equity, and inclusion. Being fair, being inclusive, diverse in all meanings of the word is really, really important to, again, get different points of view, meet different people, appeal to different audiences, and learn from different audiences too. And lastly, just the tale that never ends. Like I just said, the story isn't going to just be a book on your shelf that you refer to every now and again. The story is you. You tell your story in your own way and take on board anything from our talk today that might help, but obviously don't be dictated to because you know you best. So, yeah, I think we're going to hang around if anyone wants to come up and have any questions. But that's it. Thank you so much.
Thanks, guys. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you,
Thank you.
Sonya. Thank you, Amira.